So I'm not a DC fan, nothing against DC, but since the beginning of the DCEU, we can all agree that most of their products have been less than spectacular, and even before the DCEU. So when Black Adam was announced, I originally intended to sit out for it, but after seeing people on Twitter talk about how this movie is quote-unquote peak cinema, I decided I had to see the spandex-laden Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for myself, and honestly, it was the most fun I've had in the theaters this year. I went into this film pretty biased, not only for my general disdain for DC, but I've just heard critics call this movie bad, and I personally tend to agree with critic scores. I'm just a more critical person. Typically, they align with my thoughts. But honestly, I disagree with most of what I've heard about this movie. For starters, this movie is just insanely fun. I think the only parts of this movie that are a bit boring are like the first 10-ish minutes. The opening is really boring. It's just Black Adam lore, but it's not really told in an interesting way. And the person who does the narrating for it is really not putting their whole Badusi into it. The rest of the first half, however, is really, really good. It also does a really good job of subtly setting up the antagonist, and the action in it is a lot better than I thought it was gonna be. I feel like with movies like Black Adam, you don't really have much actual stakes. Like when you have these Superman-powered heroes that really can't be killed by anything, the action can get boring because we know that nothing can really stop them. He does have one weakness, but I you not when they say we find out what it is 15 minutes into the film and it actually never comes up again anyway. That being said, Black Adam is really fun to watch because he actually brutalizes these people with zero remorse. Like, this shit is crazy to watch. And I'm surprised they managed to keep this movie PG-13 with some of the shit he does. The action in this movie was really creative, which honestly pleasantly surprised me. There's another scene in this movie that obviously was inspired by spaghetti westerns. It was so much fun to watch. I was getting giddy in my seat like a 7-year-old with undiagnosed ADHD. That shit was fantastic. To be completely honest, when I heard The Rock was gonna be in this movie, I was kind of expecting him to phone it in. I'm not typically a huge fan of The Rock's acting. We all know that The Rock has a really bad tendency to get typecasted, but he gives this role a lot more than I thought he would, and I think this role honestly gives him a lot more than I thought it would. To be entirely fair, all he really does is scowl for like 80% of the film, but I think he is kind of good at subtly showing emotion through facial expressions, which is something we don't really see from him that often. There's a kid in this movie whose name I've honestly forgotten, but that's just because I hate children and I'm forgetful. But he was so much fun to watch when he was with Adam. I would go so far as to say this kid is Black Adam's main point of character development. We're gonna call this kid Little Timmy, but when Little Timmy and Adam weren't in the same scene, Little Timmy was horrible to watch. This kid's acting is really, really wooden. And being a child, in my opinion, is not an excuse for bad acting, especially in like $100 million budget movies. There's literally a scene in the third act of this film where they dubbed over whatever he originally said. I'm assuming it was because his line delivery was bad, because that's something that goes out through the entire film. Little Timmy has like really bad line delivery and almost no facial expressions for 90% of his lines. Everyone else is really good though. Pierce Brosnan does an amazing job as Dr. Fate, and he's followed up by, maybe topped by, Aldous Hodge's Hawkman. Aldous and Dwayne have some amazing chemistry, and I really hope we see them again. I hope we see Hawkman again, because he was fucking awesome in this. As I'm not a DC fan, I didn't actually know who Hawkman was before this, but I'm already excited to see him again. Although Noah Centineo and Quintessa Swindell do amazing for their jobs as Atom Smasher and Cyclone respectively, they just seem to be there to kind of pad out the roster. They don't really do anything for the entire movie. They just kind of show up to be the secondary fight for whatever's going on. They don't really do much of value, and it sucks. They're really fun characters. Hawkman and Atom Smasher have some really good chemistry and one really funny interaction, but they just don't do much for the film, unfortunately. Also, I've heard critics say that Black Adam doesn't develop throughout the film, and to be fair, that's slightly true, but it's not nearly as bad as they make it sound. He's definitely changed by the end of the film. Black Adam and Hawkman are pretty much our only two characters that seem to receive any sort of character development, but if we're being fair, do the other characters need character development? In terms of comedy, this is one of the categories this movie probably beats all of Marvel Phase 4 in. Reason being, it's written really well. Characters who wouldn't crack jokes, like realistically would not crack jokes, just don't. Hawkman and Black Adam don't make jokes. They say funny things in response to something, or they'll say lines that are funny to us, but not in the situation that they're in. But they'll never go out of their way to amuse the audience, and I'm all here for that. But to somewhat contradict myself, Black Adam probably ends up being the funniest character in this movie without even trying. I would say he's probably funnier than the comic relief character, who I found being less funny as the film went on. But Black Adam trying to adjust himself to his current situation is honestly really funny. Once again, it's funny to us, but not to him. All of his interactions with little Timmy that I mentioned earlier are gold, in both the comical sense and the general writing sense. But I genuinely don't think there's a single bad joke in this film, but that's because they use them pretty sparingly. There's none of that, oh, he's right behind me, isn't he, shit that Marvel does. Okay, pause for a second. I wrote that line as a joke, but I forgot that they literally say that in Thor: Love and Thunder. In my biased state, I was looking for editing flaws that were in the movie, but honestly there weren't really any. There's one jarring jump cut near the end of the film, but other than that, it's pretty well done. And that jump cut is probably blink and you'll miss it, and I may have just seen it wrong. I'd probably have to go see it a second time for myself just to really say that. But the editing is really good. Nothing really praiseworthy. The use of the camera and lighting isn't that fantastic, but it doesn't really have to be for movies like this. I think we take our comic book movies a little too seriously these days. One thing I like about this movie is it's not some globe-trotting adventure. I think all but 4 scenes in this movie take place somewhere outside of the main city, and I respect that. Because it ties into the story really well, it feels really natural for them to not have to go anywhere else. The villain in this movie is okay. He makes sense, but he isn't really that interesting. I'm not going to explain this for obvious spoiler reasons, but the villain literally pulls a "did you try W for Wumbo?" shit, and it's fucking hilarious. You'll know it when you see it, but keep an eye out for it if you see this movie. The final battle is actually pretty weak. Thinking back, I'm not actually sure Black Adam threw a single punch. It's an okay finish, but there's much better fight scenes in this movie. I guess I was just kind of a little disappointed because we kind of just watched Black Adam, beat up random humans throughout the movie, but now he has a chance against someone around his strength and there's not really much that happens. I think some of the only really bad things about this movie are that it's pretty slow at times. And the movie does this, oh, this is what really happened thing twice. Like, it doesn't work the second time. It's a believable scene, but it's just boring. Which is once again one of the problems I had with this movie. The first half of the third act of the film and the opening of the film feel like kind of a drag to sit through. That, and when we're introduced to the Justice Society, that part's pretty boring in the opinion. Not when they do the stereotypical, this is Katana, she's got my back, but rather when we see all the characters in a room together talking for the first time. It's just kind of not that interesting to see, which is surprising because these characters have better chemistry later in the film, but they just aren't that interesting in a room together. Some of the acting is pretty stale from any character who's not a superhero, and there's a clear romance plot that starts between 2 of our characters in this movie, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like, they literally drop it in the second act after like the 3rd time I believe they imply it. So it's suffice to say they have more planned for them, but I just wonder why they even started it in this film. The story is pretty mid, to be honest. It's kind of thin. I don't think the story needs to be that in-depth, but sometimes it's like, okay, what the fuck is even happening? I do think this movie, however, does a good job at portraying what anti-heroes should be. They do a good job of having Adam being pretty solid in the gray area of whether or not he's morally correct. He's a good person in a lot of ways, but there's an interaction with a character at the end of the film that reminds you that Black Adam ain't your average Superman. But everything else about this movie is pretty solid. I'd say it's either good or great. I'm gonna talk about spoilers now. Red Adam here is gonna count down from 3. If you don't want to watch spoilers, you can just click to this timestamp. Red Adam, please count us down. Because I can't use footage straight from the film like I usually do in my reviews, I'm just gonna kind of keep this section in chronological order to make it easy for us to remember exactly what I'm talking about. Firstly, his weakness to Eternium. Like, it's shown to hurt him, but it's never used again. I guess it wasn't intentional, and to be fair, no one did live to tell the tale. But it just seems like it happened so that Adriana could get him into bed. I usually hate bullet time scenes, but the one in the first fight was really good, to be honest. Like, I think the hand grenade in the mouth is a perfect example of, this is funny to us, but Black Adam just sees this as an efficient way to kill this guy. The romance between Atom Smasher and Cyclone is weak and forced and has no part in this movie. I don't know why they put it in and wasted screen time on it. All the fight scenes between Adam and Hawkman are amazing. They do a great job at making it clear that Hawkman is more skilled, but realistically does not stand a chance against Black Adam. Them doing a switcheroo on Black Adam's lore twice is pretty low, especially because the second time it's just kind of dragged out and boring. And also I think it's kind of like, really, movie? You're changing the story again? Personally, I just wasn't a fan of the way they did it. Although the final villain is fun and campy, I couldn't help but think, holy that's just Satan. Like the pentagram on his chest, that was a little too much. maybe I don't have a full understanding of Dr. Fate's powers. Like I've said twice in this video already, I'm not a huge DC person. But why did he have to die? Like, could he not have freed Black Adam first and then went in? Like, I'm assuming it's part of the reason Hawkman would have died if he did. Like, maybe the fight just would have went a different way and Hawkman would have died even if Black Adam was there. But I genuinely have a hard time believing that. And the disposable CGI army at the end of the film was unnecessary. It served nothing but to pad, like, I think 5 minutes of runtime. That part could have just not been there, and little Timmy looked cringy as fuck leading that army of people in on his skateboard. I think that's all I really need to talk about for the spoilers. I think I've kind of addressed everything I really needed to in the regular review section. Okay, so it's time for conclusions. Black Adam was a lot of fun. Aside from being pretty slow at times and some wooden acting, everything else is pretty okay to great. Not stellar by any means though. This movie definitely isn't winning any Oscars, but I absolutely had a blast watching it. I think if this movie could have trimmed some fat in some areas and maybe put it back into some others, such as the story, it could have been a lot better. But for now, I'm gonna give Black Adam a solid 7 out of 10. I debated giving it a lower score, but this movie's honestly just too damn entertaining. Everyone in this film is just so enjoyable. Speaking of which, this movie's fun score is gonna get a 9 out of 10. I would give it a 10, but if it was just a little better with its pacing, it just makes parts of this movie hard to imagine sitting through for a second watch through, but everything really is just a good time. Well, Red Adam, is there anything you need to say about the film? Oh, yeah, I need to do that. Real quick before you guys go, I stream every Tuesday and Friday on Twitch. I do a lot of gaming, mostly with my friends, so they're as funny as me, probably funnier. I have a Discord server, so check that out. First 50 people to join it are gonna get like a role called Golden Keys, which is basically just like an I was here first badge. I give video and schedule updates on Twitter, and I actually recently got access to the YouTube post feature, so I might just use those and post the same thing there, but follow me on Twitter either way. I might just post a funny meme or something, I don't know. I don't really use Instagram much, but if I get enough followers, I feel like then maybe I'd have a reason to use it. I post some of my non-YouTube content, and I try to post some of my stats for my videos, so if you guys are interested in that, you can see those. One other thing, I made myself a release schedule that stretches from here until the end of this year with one video every Friday, and I think I have 2 weeks where I'll be posting 2 videos. I'm not going to announce it just in case something goes horribly wrong. I don't want to disappoint you guys, but to try and keep myself to stick to it, I do want to say that my next video is going to be around 15 minutes and it's on the Emoji Movie, and then the week after that, yeah, I will have a Black Panther review up on Tuesday the 15th. Okay. I think that's all. I lied actually. I took a poll to see what you guys wanted to see me do a commentary on next, and Morbius won. I think I got like 50% of the votes. So look out for a video on Morbius sometime by the end of this month. If I'm not mistaken, it should be either the 18th or the 23rd, something like that. Okay, is that good? Is that all? You satisfied, Red Adam? All right. See you guys next week.